Okay, team, good evening and good morning for everybody. Uh, this is Naveen Nanjundappa from 12 Principles Consulting. Today, I am here to talk about a very interesting topic that has been a problem for most of the people, which is estimation. And I would try to ensure that you get all the information, everything that you need, so that this estimation problem, it is a big problem in estimation, is well aware. You would get to know what to estimate, what not to estimate, and also why and how of this estimations. I am sure this session, by end of this session, your view on estimations is going to change, and you will rethink about should we really estimate. So if you are ready, let's get started. Estimations. Estimations is a very common term that we use in our personal lives as well. Everywhere. For example, if you want to go ahead and make a journey from one location to another location, you ask, what is an estimated time that I would take? Or you would ask, how much is the estimate of a distance from this place to another place? Uh, or you want to spend some money, what is the estimated cost to do it? I mean, in fact, estimation is part and parcel of our life. We estimate anything and everything. So let's get started with the first point. The first point is to understand why. Why do we estimate at all? Why do you think we estimate? Go ahead, post it in the comment section. Why do you think we estimate? What is the reason that we have to estimate? Where are the reasons that we estimate for? In fact, this is the commenting section is only available for people who have subscribed to this channel. So if you want to comment, you need to be subscribed, and I would request you to go ahead subscribe. There are a lot of videos in this video in this channel that would be worthwhile for you. Okay, so why would you need to estimate at all? In fact, if you go deeper and deeper and try to understand, we estimate because we want to manage the risk. That's it. In order to manage the risk, we want to estimate. And when we estimate something, if the number that we estimate is within our manageable risk condition, within our risk appetite, then our estimate is going to be, we are going to have a good risk appetite, so we don't worry about it. For example, let's assume that you want to go to an airport to catch a flight, and you have to be in the airport, let's say at 9 o'clock in the evening. Depending on the traffic conditions, you start from your house at 6 o'clock in the evening, and your estimate to reach the airport is 1 hour. You're not worried at all, because despite the traffic conditions, you know that the estimate is well within the range that you want to reach the airport. You want to reach the airport by 9 o'clock, which is about 3 hours of time from the time you leave, and your estimate is 1 hour, which means we know that we don't have to take a risk on this. Yeah, you don't have to take a risk on the journey because your estimate is 1 hour and you have to reach the destination in 3 hours. Think about it. If the estimation to the destination was like 4 hours, do you think you would have been a normal? No. You know that the moment you hear the word 4 hours, you know that it is a high risk and you would want to mitigate the risk. So you will start finding the ways of mitigating the risk. So one has to understand that estimations is mostly used for mitigating the risk, and the number that you get for estimation is, if it is well within the risk appetite, then you have no problem, and that estimation absolutely does not matter. Example, to reach the airport, if it is 1 hour or 1.5 hours, it does not matter because your risk appetite is up to 3 hours. So remember this. Let's go ahead and keep looking at what are the different aspects of estimations, what are the different aspects of different things that you would need to know when it comes to agility and Scrum. So I'm going to go ahead and give you a completely a different experience of the what do you call online session. So let's go ahead and look at this. Okay, I hope that you are now able to see my hand, and the best thing is to double click on this, make it as a full screen view, and that way it is going to be the best experience for you. Okay, so watch it at a full screen view with a full resolution, maybe at a high resolution, and that is going to be a useful. So let's get into the conversation. We have estimations. The foremost thing, the at the bottom of our thoughts, we know that why do we estimate? We estimate so that we can mitigate some risk. We can know whether our risks or our work or activity is within the risk, and this way uh, we can take necessary actions or change the plan of actions. Now, we know why to estimate because of the risk estimation, risk mitigation, or planning for a risk. Now, let us go with oh, what is the risk that we foresee? Why do we foresee this risk? Or what kind of thoughts you would get? Let's get from the starting. If you see a Stacy diagram, which talks about various different sources, various different locations, like simple projects, complex, complicated, and chaos. We are going to focus on a zone which we call, or Stacy called it as a complex system or complex zone. This is where, if we have to apply for Scrum and Agility, we have a place where requirements are completely uncertain, which means we have a big uncertainty on our requirements, and the technology is also uncertain. Now, when the requirements and technology is uncertain, the only way that we could I'm just looking at the choice. Okay, I think I'm going to go ahead and leave it at this point, probably because I need one more. Okay, I'm going to leave it at this. Let's go ahead and use this way. So we have a we have estimations. Why do we estimate? Because we want to make sure that it is a risk mitigation. Okay. In a Stacy diagram, we have different areas. I'm predominantly interested in this a complex zone. In a complex zone, we see that the requirements and the technology both are uncertain. So there is always an uncertainty in the requirements, uncertainty in the technology. Whenever there is an uncertainty in the requirements or basically whenever we are in the uncertainty, we need to inspect and adapt, and that's the key. So remember, inspect and adapt includes some checks and then corrections. So let's go ahead and apply this. First and foremost, if we have to apply this complex zone into the product backlog. So we all know that the product backlog is a to-do list of items. So this is a to-do list of items, and we have various different product backlog items. Now these various different product backlog items, they are all in a complex zone where requirements could be evolving and the technology could be evolving or uncertainty. So we have a bunch of uncertain product backlog items. So what do we do when we have an uncertain product backlog items? In Scrum, specifically I'm talking about Scrum now. In Scrum, we take this and do what is called as product backlog refinement or product backlog management to go ahead and create a product backlog which is more refined. And in this process, what we do is we take a small subset of this product backlog items and then create a smaller list of product backlog items. Basically, we refine them, understand them better, and then have the smaller product backlog items. So if I have to put a color code on them, so this is what is going to happen. We have uncertain product backlog item, and these uncertain product backlog items remain in the product backlog, but there are a certain product backlog item at the top. Now, what happens is we have certainty about the product backlog items, and these are the ready items that can be taken into a product backlog into sprint planning meeting and can be worked upon. Now, this itself is what Scrum is talking about. The product backlog is emerging, evolving. The product backlog is going to be dynamic and never ending. Now, if you see that when the product backlog itself is evolving, emerging, dynamic, never ending, during this, the only way which we can go ahead and solve is to constantly inspect and adapt. We need to constantly inspect and adapt. And this constant inspect and adapt will make us look at the product backlog, understand the complexity, work with the stakeholders and customers, users, arrive at a potential solution that would solve their problems, and come up with a best solution that is mutually agreed and implemented. So now you know the thought process around product backlog. Now just apply a thought. If I say that you have to go from point A to point B, let's say our point B was an airport from your house. Now, if I ask you, what is the estimate to reach the airport? I mean, this estimate will depend on a lot of parameters. Example, it will depend on the first one, the time of travel, the mode of travel, and the route, potentially which vehicle you're using, who is going to drive, what is the route conditions, what is the traffic conditions. And not just that, it could also be dependent on is there any accidents on the road, and that road is blocked, so what is the road conditions, and that accident that is happening on the road could be completely dynamic. when you started from your house, it could be a clean route, and no matter what instrument you use, maybe Google Maps or any other types of tools and techniques, it shows that the road is clear, but there could be an accident right in front of you and the road is blocked. We don't ever know. So there could be any unforeseen events. And not just that, your own vehicle can go to a breakdown. And I don't think you start a journey to think about my vehicle is going to go with a breakdown, right? We always go ahead with a anticipation that everything is going to go down and we don't have any breakdowns. Okay. So now you think about it. If I ask you what is the estimate, let's say the time estimate from going from your home, from your house to the airport to catch a flight. Why? Every time you answer this question, you are actually giving an answer which is more optimistic. And let's say you have to reach the airport at 9 p.m. and you start your house at 6 p.m. and the estimate is going to be, let's say the estimate is 1 hour. In spite of all these things, if you say the estimate is about 1 hour, you're going to go ahead and say, okay, this estimate looks okay for me. I can take this risk and make a journey. But then if the estimate was 4 hours, then you would be thinking about, is this really worthwhile having a discussion? Is it really worthwhile making a move? What can I change? Can I change the route? Can I change the mode? Can I change the time? Do I have to look at any other alternative? That means you're constantly looking at changing something when your estimations is beyond the risk. So now, every time you estimate, you need to know that estimation does not have any meaning if you're not using it for the risk appetite. Example, estimate of 1 hour to airport has no meaning unless you know that I have to reach by a specific time. That means my available time or the time to reach the airport is 3 hours and my estimate to reach is 1 hour. So I'm good to go. Think about it. Now let's come and apply the same thing here. Basically, the product backlog is dynamic, evolving, never-ending, and emerging. And just sufficient, just in time, we do a product backlog refinement and keep the work items ready, small. The rest of the product backlog items are still complex and they are not broken down. Which means you just know when you start from your house, you just know that a certain route to go to the destination is known. The rest you have to emerge, you have to go ahead and find it out. Think over. Is your estimation really making sense? No. Which means I cannot, when I don't know the distance or when I don't know which route I'm going to take, estimation does not make sense. What you have to do is set a goal and make the parameter which you are unable to estimate as variable. Very interesting. What I'm trying to say is make the parameter. That means if you want to go ahead and have a time estimation and you don't know which route you're going to take, you don't know what are the events that is taking place, just make the time as not at all a concern. Make it as a variable, focus on the goal. Now let's look at this. If the product backlog is dynamic and emerging, can I make an estimate on when I'm going to complete this? It's very difficult. And that's the big problem that companies are trying to solve. And that is not going to happen. It is not a traditional method where you had a simple project and you could work. And what is simple project? Simple project is something here. Simple project is where you have crystal clear clarity on the requirements, crystal clear clarity on the technology. And in a simple project, you have good clarity on what needs to be done and how it can be done. So you can have an estimate, but that estimate is going to go ahead and give you a good risk appetite. I mean, confidence. But in the product backlog, in the Scrum, the first thing is the product backlog itself is dynamic, and any kind of estimation, especially the time estimation, does not make sense on the product backlog. So what does Scrum say? In fact, estimation is not at all part of Scrum. Estimation is part of your risk mitigation. Estimation is part of your planning to mitigate the risk. And people can go wrong in completely misusing this. And by the way, estimations, there are different tools and techniques to estimate. We're going to talk about all those things. So let's look at the estimations, the next step. So now, let's go ahead and see this. We have a complex, we have a to-do list of items. I'm going to call it as a product backlog. And this gets into the product backlog refinement. And we create a smaller chunks of product backlog items. So I'm going to go ahead and mark this in order to make sure that we understand the context. These are all uncertain product backlog items, and there are few items that are certain. The rest of them remain uncertain. And this is a constant thing that happens. So the next time you do a product backlog refinement, I'm hoping that some of these items would have been done, and so you would have some more added during this period, and the cycle repeats. So we keep the product backlog items ready, and the rest of the items are new. And this cycle is going to just repeat. You do the product backlog refinement, and then ... the same thing. Now think over. There's always an uncertainty in the product backlog. So the first thing, there is uncertain product backlog items always. Now, when the product backlog items are uncertain, can we estimate? That's a big question. And now, estimation itself has different thoughts. Different things that you can estimate. So this is where you need to go ahead and ask, okay, we need to estimate, but what do we estimate actually? What are the things that we are going to estimate? The first thing, you can, when I'm talking about the Scrum and in the software development, you can go ahead and estimate the size of the product backlog item. That means how complex. So size is going to talk about how complex the system is. Is it clear? Is it known? How much is known? How much is unknown? And a lot of things. And then we have on the other side the effort estimation. Now, in the effort estimation, we're going to talk about how much effort is required. So basically, how can we do on this? How much time would it take for us to finish this work? Okay, so we have a size estimation and an effort estimation. Now let us look at this. If we have a product backlog and the product backlog items are always uncertain, there are always uncertain items in the product backlog. Can we estimate? Let's take up two of these. Can we estimate the size, the complexity? The answer is size estimation we can do. Yes. Can we do a effort estimation? And effort estimation is no. Now what does it mean? When there are a lot of uncertainty, the effort estimation, basically it is, you can't do it, and even if you do it, even if it is done, let me just go ahead and answer that as well, because some people might say, no, we can always do an effort estimation. Even if you do the effort estimation, the The cone of uncertainty is going to be so huge that there is no way, there is no value in this, because it's going to be a huge variation. So think about it. Now let us go on to this. Can we estimate the size? Answer is yes. But then the estimation of size itself has to be done, can be done in various different ways. Example, you can go ahead and estimate the one way of estimation in size is story points. The other ways of estimation, the other units, the other ways of estimation is example t-shirt size. Now you have story point estimation as one unit. This is a unit of estimation. This is also a unit of estimation. But then while you are actually estimating, this story point is popularly expressed in terms of Fibonacci series, which is 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and so on, the modified series going on. On a t-shirt size, you can always estimate it as a standard known, small, medium, large, extra large, extra large, and so on. If you want, you can add less than small, more than this. All those things are your variations. Okay, now let's go ahead and look at this. Use your common sense. I don't know if anybody teaches this, but then this is what we do and I coach. Just use your common sense. There are product backlog items which are uncertain in the product backlog. And let's assume that you want to deliver 25 items or 30 items in the product backlog. So let's assume this is where is your release coming up. Now, can you estimate all these items when they are in uncertain zone? Answer, absolutely not. The second one, when they're uncertain, can you estimate the size, how complex they are? Answer is yes. But then what will you do when you estimate? What is your objective of estimation? The first thing is you need to ask, what is the objective? Unfortunately, many people just have an objective of putting a number, put a number onto this, and especially the buzzword of story points, put the number and then say that, okay, our estimations are done. Or unfortunately, they use one story point equals 8 hours, 4 hours, or any number, and that is another nonsense. So, can we estimate? Yes, but what is the objective? Remember, if the estimation, I can go ahead and have as many number of estimations as you want, but then there can be two things. The first one is the objective of estimation, that is basically to mitigate the risk, and second one is you need to understand when the objective is to find out the complexity, but what do you do after that? What do you do after that? That's a big question. So now let us look at this. The first one, let's assume that I take a product backlog item. The whole team sits together. They look at this product backlog item and then they have to estimate. Let's assume the whole team looks at this product backlog item, the requirement, and then estimates that this product backlog item is big. Which means the team thinks it is big. How? They're going to go ahead and say in t-shirt sizing, they might say this is XL. That is the size that team members are going to say. And then if you're using a different unit, let's say story point, the team members are going to say, let's say this is, all of us agree that these are 13 story points. Okay, you said big, XL t-shirt sizing, you said XL. If you are using story point, you said 13. All the team members agree that it is 13 story point. We'll talk about how did they arrive at 13 later on. So they have 13. Now the question is, what next? The answer is very simple. If you're in Scrum, you're using Scrum, in Scrum, you need to ensure that the product backlog item gets refined, and the refined product backlog items, the qualities of a refined product backlog item is small. And how do you define small? Small is something that the team can inspect and adapt within sprints. So technically, small for a 6-member team for a 4 weeks time, that is sprint, could be different from 8-member team working on a 1 week sprint. So sprint, the size small is typically dependent on the team's capability, the definition of done. So depends on the definition of done, it depends on your capability, depends on the infrastructure. So basically small is very subjective. But then this big, let's assume that there is a team which has 4 week sprint. Okay, let's say there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 people with a 4 week sprint. At the same time, let's assume there is a team of 5 and they have 1 week sprint. Try to understand the context that we are trying to bring in. If this team looks at this product backlog item and they all sit together and then say, this is 13 story point. Okay, let's for a moment block this. Okay, let's say this team says 13 story point. Now the question is this 13 story point small enough for the team to inspect and adapt within a sprint? That means inspect and adapt means they do complete end-to-end work. Is it sufficient for this team? If the answer is yes, then they don't have to worry about it. It is small, they can move on. Scrum says the item is small, move on. But then let's assume that the same story card or the product backlog item, when it is given to this team with the 5-member team and 1 week sprint, if these people say, no, this is big, then they cannot work on the story directly because it does not pass the small criteria. So what are you supposed to do? Look at this. What after? You estimate. The first thing is you cannot, big item cannot can't enter sprint or sprint planning meeting. That means you cannot have a big item in a sprint. You have to break it down into small. So what is the natural step? Irrespective of what is the product backlog item size, it has to be broken down into smaller chunks. Okay. So here we have uncertain big item and this is small. So these are all small. So now look at this. Can we estimate the size for all the product backlog items? Answer is yes, but big items does not matter because they are big. They cannot be into the sprint. So they have to be at one or the other point broken down into smaller chunks. So the number that you gave as 13 or 15 absolutely does not matter, or even Excel does not matter. And now let us come to this. So what are we supposed to do then? I come from an astronomy background and I always say this. You know, for an astrophysicist, especially who's studying the stars, you ask them, okay, how many elements do you have? They'll say there are only 2 elements. Example, how many elements do we have? A chemist would say a complete periodic table, but a physicist is going to say there are only 2. In fact, if you get deeper, it's very interesting. What are the 2 elements? The first one is hydrogen. The second element is I don't care. All I care is it hydrogen? And the rest, I don't care. We don't care what is the size of that. So what do we have to do? I don't care. Why? Because it is not hydrogen, as simple as that. Now let us go ahead, apply this. We have a product backlog item and we need to estimate. Is the product backlog item small? Then good. If this product backlog item is big or not small, basically, we'll say not small. Let it be big or very large, it does not matter. So if it is not small, simple, I don't care. Why I don't care about it? Because this particular item can't be picked in sprint during the sprint planning meeting. So it does not matter what is the size. Only small can be picked. So now look at it. You can only have a small item getting into the sprint. Big items does not matter. I don't care. So now let's apply the same thought process to our product backlog. What is that? We have a product backlog. I'm going to go ahead and reuse the same picture. We have a product backlog. In fact, the whole product backlog can be uncertain, a lot of uncertainties. So I don't care what is the estimate here, because we cannot estimate, and whatever is the estimate, it does not make sense. Now let us go to the second one. Once the product backlog refinement is done, all these product backlog items are small enough for the team to be inspect and adapted within a sprint. So now I don't care what is the estimate here, because they are all by default small. So they are by default small. As long as it is inspect and adaptable within a sprint, we don't care about that estimation at all. What do I mean by estimation at all? I mean the effort estimation required, because they can be done within a sprint. That's always the maximum. Now let us look at how can we apply this, or what kind of thought process is required. First of all, you need to understand that you need what is called as release strategy. So every project will have certain constraints, and there are constraints with respect to the scope, time, cost, and quality. So these are all typical constraints of any project development, product development. So what is the traditional methods that we know? We know that in our traditional methods, so I'm going to call this as strategies of 1990s to 2010, let's say. What is the strategies of 1990s to 2010? Especially because I'm using this, that is the range in which I know about the software development industry. So before that, I have no idea. So I'm going to just go ahead with this. So what do we know? The strategies in 1990s to 2010, or even now, this companies, the scope, fix scope, and then fix time, fix the cost, and expect high quality, fix quality. And this kind of all fixed works when the project is in simple zone. That means everything is crystal clear. Everything is crystal clear and everything is known. But then let's go on to the latest one. If all are fixed, is there a possibility that we can deliver? Even if you look at any project management books, it says that we try to fix all four, and that is why there are n number of reports saying that we have a cost overrun, we have a schedule overrun, we have a budget overrun, that is cost overrun, schedule overrun, or quality is low. And we try to go ahead and so now just ask, why why do we think we have all these things? We have all the cost overrun, the schedule overrun, all these things. Why do we have them? Simple. We have them because we try to fix all of this, okay? And we assume, so there is an assumption that we know everything. Hold on. Don't jump into the comments. I know now people will say, but Naveen, we have added buffer. So now people add buffer. In fact, according to me, buffer is a nonsense. Okay, why? Because adding buffer, how much do you add a buffer on? You add a buffer 10%. I mean, you're going to add a buffer 20%. You're going to add a buffer 50%. I mean, how much do you want to add a buffer? First of all, what is this buffer? Buffer is basically added because you don't know certain things can go wrong, which means even though you thought that everything is known, implicitly you expect something can go wrong. Now the question is, when you know that something can go wrong, how can you fix a buffer of 10% is sufficient for something that goes wrong? I mean, how sure are you that only 10% of your buffer can take care of everything that is unknown that goes wrong can be done? Think about it. In fact, how can you say that 20% is sufficient? How can you say 50% is sufficient? Then why not? Why not 100%? The reason is, in a simple project, requirements are certain, technology is certain. In a simple project, requirements are certain, technology is certain. This is where the zone is. And when the requirements are crystal clear, the technology is certain, crystal clear, that means the team knows how to do what to do on. This is where you can go ahead and think that things that can go wrong are very minimal. And hence, there are many chances where 10%, 20% can probably manage can potentially finish your work. But then there is a big assumption, what if requirement changes? What if somebody is on leave? What if somebody is unable to produce the result that is required? That means there's a lot of uncertainty with respect to the people, infrastructure, and something beyond your control. In such cases, it's not going to be sufficient, and hence there is a cost overrun, schedule overrun, quality, or whatever nonsense. So we are clear that the strategies that we used in 1990s to 2010 has proven for us that there is a lot of cost overrun and a lot of problems. But then nobody thought about why this was happening. And you know what is the root cause problem for this? The root cause problem is you are going to estimate. I mean, why all these things? Because you estimate, and whatever is the number that you get, you go ahead and commit on this. You commit on this. And that is where people go wrong. because estimations are estimations. They're not commitments. They should not be taken into a commitment. So now how are you going to look at it in different way? Simple. As I told you, you want to go to a destination, you're spending about, let's say, 1 hour of a journey and your risk is about 3 hours. It is okay for you to go ahead and have a journey because your expectation is 3 hours, your journey is 1 hour. So you don't commit that I will reach within 1 hour or at 1 hour. You will say that we are risk free, so we will reach the destination. So destination is important. So now let us come to what are the strategies that could make sense in 2022. Now, first of all, we need to understand in 2022, we are in a very dynamic and competitive world. Now, in a dynamic and competitive world, you cannot have the uh, strategies of 1990s. So the first thing is strategies of 1990s may not work, will not work. So don't copy paste them. Example, fixing all parameters, all these things. So you need to think differently. You need to have a different strategy going forward. So how can that different strategy be? Very simple. First, try to understand the market conditions and then come up with our scope, time, cost, and quality. So what we can do is forget about agility. Let's change the strategy of releasing the product and looking at the product development. Okay, we have scope, time, cost, and quality. So the first thing is we need to deal with uncertainty. So we all accept there is uncertainty. And the only way to go ahead and win over uncertainty is to inspect and adapt. So we are very clear. That very statement will put us into a context of we cannot estimate, we cannot fix all the parameters that we have listed down. So what we can do is we have to focus on at least one parameter of this. One should be a variable. At least one should be a variable. What are those one should be a variable meaning? You can go ahead and make a scope variable, you can make a time variable, cost variable, or quality variable. Make whatever you want as a variable. Okay, so let's assume that time is a variable. Which means you have fixed the scope. Let's say you need 75 features, you have fixed the scope, but time is a variable. So what are you supposed to do? You are going to estimate on the variable. So you should remember that the estimation is always on the variable, and as long as this time estimation is that now estimate is within your risk, you're good to go. If the estimate is not within a risk, then you need to change your strategy. So now let us look at this. If you are, let's pick up a different sheet. Let's look at case one. Okay. Let's assume there is an organization, and in this organization, the company has decided that we are going to fix the time, the scope. And when you say fix the scope, we just have some big functionality that we need to release to the market. So I'm going to go ahead and mark that. So we're going to go ahead and have the product backlog. The product backlog is infinite to-do list of items. But what they have done is they have marked that for a release, remember for a release, they have marked this is our release scope. So they have marked that this is our release scope. Is it fixed? Absolutely. You can go ahead and fix it. And how is the product backlog? The product backlog is complex, which means we need to inspect an app. There is no guarantee. Okay. Now, what is the other parameters that the company wants to do? The company may want to fix the cost. Now, it's a very interesting term. How can you fix the cost and vary the time? I mean, you can work with lesser paid engineers, make it go for a longer duration, or you can go with higher paid engineers and come up with a lesser cost, a lesser time. So basically, let's assume that you have fixed the cost. That means you have a team. So I'm going to go ahead, translate this into you have a team. Okay. So the team is fixed, the scope is fixed, and you expect high quality. So all three parameters are fixed. What is the only variable that you can think of? The variable is time. So now variable is a time. So how does the work goes on? Very simple. You are going to estimate on the variable. Always on the variable. Just use your common sense. Are you going to estimate on the scope? Does not make sense because you have already fixed the scope. Can you estimate on the cost? Does not make sense because I've already taken a team. That means these are my constraints that I've already fixed. I can only estimate the time because time is the only variable. And whatever is the time estimation, this estimation should be within my risk. Example. Let's assume that we have the scope and every sprint based on our potential, how much we are going to finish and how much is left. We can use a crude method or we can use a velocity concept or any method. Okay, I usually go with number of items completed and how much is the potential to complete. So you can go ahead and estimate how much more time can we take. And let's assume that your estimation is coming up as 5 sprints. And your risk is at 10 sprints. Then there is nothing to worry about. So this 5 sprints of estimation is not a commitment. It is just a feel good that, okay, we are still good to go within our risk appetite. We can go ahead and release it. Okay. Now let us look at the same thing. How does this case work in Scrum? I mean, I am conflicting now with a couple of people who will say, oh, in Scrum scope should be fixed variable. You cannot fix the scope. I mean, the answer for all those things is simple. This is a product backlog. And in the product backlog, you have frozen the scope. You have said that, okay, this is my release scope. And remember, this product backlog is a to-do list of items infinite, so it will still go on. Now, what happens is you have a time axis, and these are all the sprints. Okay. Now, at this point, let's say you are finished with one sprint, second sprint, and third sprint, whatever. So now let's say at this point in time, you have done with couple of items. So from here, whatever is left, let's say X items are left, you're going to go ahead and predict the time. So you go ahead and predict the time. This is the minimum and this is the maximum. So that is my time prediction. And what is my risk? My risk is somewhere here. Let's say on the time axis, this is my risk. If it goes beyond this, this is my risk. So as long as my prediction is within the risk, I don't have to worry about it. We are good to go. What does it mean? Our current predictions are saying that all these items, whatever we know, can be potentially finished within our risk. Let's go ahead and look at the second one. After some time, that is after one sprint, the team would be coming to the next sprint and they would have finished some of the items during this and they have Y items. So from here, they would want to go ahead and estimate how much time that they would take. And this is their new time. As long as the new estimation is within the risk, we are good to go. Let's look at the third one. In the next sprint, they start working on some of the things. And here, let's say they have Z items. From here, if the estimation is going to be like minimum this much, maximum this much, that is how the estimation is coming. As long as the estimation time, okay, predictability is coming within the risk, we are good to go. Now, what do you mean by estimation in the range? Very simple. Now let us go ahead and talk about Scrum. Let's say they have picked up 3 items in this sprint. By the end of the sprint, they're done with 2 items and the third item has a feedback. So there are some changes. This changes gets onto the product backlog. So this changes will be put back onto the product backlog and this changes is part of the release. That means the moment you add this product backlog item into the product backlog, that change has to be done before the release. Because initially we did not know these changes may potentially come in. So you may have the change, gets back. Now let us go to the next item. In this sprint, let's say during this sprint, the team picked up 4 items and all 3 items are done. The 4th item, they get a change. Now this changes will go back to the product backlog and all these changes have to be implemented before the release. And that is how, even though the scope is fixed, because we are in a complex zone, remember, we are in this zone here. We are in the zone where it is complex. So each requirement is in a complex zone like this. Each requirement is in a complex zone. Now each of the requirements can go through changes. Now each of these changes have to be done as part of the scope. Now what does that mean? These changes are acceptable. What is the context of evolving and emerging changes we are taking into account in the product backlog, and hence the time becomes a variable. So we cannot guarantee that we will do it on this day. Example, on the first day we said that it might potentially take 5 sprints. In our risk appetite it is 10 sprints. After first sprint you get some changes, then you go ahead and predict again. After second sprint you get some changes, you go ahead and predict again. And now after second sprint, if your prediction is still 5 more sprints, meaning you have already done with 2 sprints, your prediction is still 5 more sprints or 5 to 6 more sprints, and your risk appetite is now 8. So your prediction is 5 to 6 more, but your risk is still 8 sprints. So it is absolutely fine. So these changes are most welcome. But let's assume it goes up to a case where your prediction of changes is going to go ahead in such a way that the time cannot be done within the risk. Example, let's look at this. In the next sprint, let's say one sprint and then the next sprint. In this sprint, you expect that the prediction is going to finish within this risk, but then the prediction at this risk is going to be something like this: minimum here, maximum here, which means it is exceeding the risk. Now you have a big question mark. Should we really continue? This is an exact case of you are on a journey from your house to airport. You have to reach the airport by 9 o'clock. Okay, you have to reach the airport by 9 o'clock. But When you started, the estimation was 1 hour. But as you started the journey, your vehicle broke down, so the tire has to be replaced, and that took about 45 minutes. So now you have already spent 45 minutes. So how much is your estimation? Your estimation to reach the destination is still about 45 minutes. Okay. But then your risk appetite is about 2 hours 15 minutes. You still have 2 hours 15 minutes. Now what do? You will continue your journey. So there is absolutely no problem. Now you go another few distance, there is some accident. That means you have to wait on the road, and there is absolutely nothing that you can do. So what are the things? You're going to wait and then hope that it is going to clear, or you will get out and clear the road. That means there are some changes. Now you have spent another 45 minutes. So you've already spent like 45 minutes in the traffic. The problem, you have spent 45 minutes on tire changes. So 1.5 hours is gone. And now what is your estimation? 30 minutes more. So let's assume 30 minutes more. So you have 30 minutes more to reach the airport. And your expected time of arrival is approximately 1 hour now. That is the risk. You have to reach the airport in 1 hour. And you are estimating 30 minutes. You're still not in attention. Why? Because the tire punctures or tire changes and then the accidents is not going to impact you, because your risk appetite is still at 9 o'clock. Now let's assume that you get closer to the airport and there is a huge traffic jam in the airport because of some nonsense, some accident. And now you will start looking at the clock. I hope some of you are able to connect to what I'm saying if you have experienced this in your personal life. You'll start looking at the clock, because every minute is important. And if every minute your estimation is going beyond the risk, example, you need to reach the counter within 15 minutes and your estimation shows that it is 20 minutes to reach the airport, you will start rethinking. There's a huge traffic jam. If I go by the car, it is not going to reach the destination within the time. So let me change the strategy. That means whenever there is a risk, whenever your estimations is beyond the risk, this is, you have to change. So I'm going to go ahead and write down, think about changing strategy. The same strategy will not work. Okay. So same strategy does not work. Example, you have to reach the counter by 15 minutes, and if you are in the car or a taxi and that takes estimation of 20 minutes to reach the counter or the parking lot, I don't think anybody will have the normal BP to stay in the car and then wait and say that, okay, I'm going to stay in the car for, I'm sure you would just take a luggage and just start walking, because that is much faster than walking in the being in the traffic and staying in the car. That's exactly what we mean by change the strategy. So your strategy originally was to reach the destination by car. Now your strategy is to go ahead and reach the destination within your risk appetite with a different strategy, that is by walk. Now let us look at this. All the while till this point you made a implementation, and now the strategy is changing. There is a risk. The moment you get to that risk point, you go ahead and change the strategy. That is, you can add some new changes, new people or teams to do it faster, some infrastructure changes, some subject matter experts who can speed up the stuff, or you can go ahead and relook at, is the scope really required? Example, I would tell you, there was one situation which I was in exactly the same. I literally dropped my 20 kg luggage bag. Literally dropped out of 20 kg luggage bag, because I cannot take the luggage and then walk up to the airport counter. So I literally dropped the luggage. I said, like, all I need is an air ticket, passport, and then go to the destination. I will manage the cloth and everything in the destination place. So, but I need to catch this flight. So I'll just walk, and that walking was much easier. I ran some distance. So that means your strategy is changing. The scope, even though originally you thought was fixed, now the scope versus the risk plays a huge role, and that is where you change the strategy. I hope it is making sense. Now, for all these strategic changes, in order to make the strategic changes, you estimate. Now I want to ask all of you who are watching, how many of you have looked upon estimation as strategic changes input? No. You just look at it as, okay, somebody asked me for an estimated, give a number, and then you're done. That's an absolute nonsense. Okay. So you estimate so that you can go ahead, think about strategic changes, when to change the strategy. Can we continue the same strategy? That's the most important part. Yeah. Now I can apply the same logic for scope being variable and time being fixed, which means I'm going to make a time fixed. That means release on 25th of November. But then I can go ahead and have as many changes on the scope, and on 25th of November, whatever is 100% done, we can go ahead and release it. So now your release, so this is all your release strategy. So now all your release strategies are independent of what is the estimation. Why? Because they might be big, small, it don't care. I have to just go ahead and release all 75. So your work is like all 75 have to be done. Now let us come to this. A beautiful example for understanding this is cricket score. Let's assume that you are playing a cricket. Example. You're playing cricket and you're batting second. That means you have a target of 255 runs to make. Now think about it. As you start playing, let's assume that this is the number of overs, not time. Number of overs. As you start looking at number of overs, every over the team members are making some score. Let's say 5 runs, 3 runs, 8 runs, 2 runs, 5 runs, 5 runs. I mean 8, 5. So you lost some wicket, and then some more, then this, something like this. Now you have scored, let's say about 90 runs in 10 overs. Now what does that indicate? This indicates the current run rate. So people who are watching cricket matches will know CRR means the current rate at which the team is scoring. The current run rate is 90 divided by 10. That's approximately 9 runs per over. Okay. But then what is the asking rate? I mean, that means what is the risk? Because there are not infinite overs. You have to finish the match within 50 overs. So as you go here, this is the 50 overs match. So you have to finish the match. Now, what do you know? I need to go ahead and score the remaining runs. That is about 165 runs. So I need to score 165 runs in how many overs? 40 overs. That means my required run rate is approximately 4.1 or less. Wow, look at this now. This is what I was telling you. My required run rate is 4.1. That means from now onwards, if I start scoring at 4.1 runs per over, if I start scoring 4.1 runs per over, there is a high probability that I will win the match without losing a wicket. But then what is my current scoring rate? 9. That means that is almost double. So I don't have to worry about 50 overs. We will finish this in about 29th, 30th over. We don't have to worry about it. And this is where estimations and predictions come into picture. Super. So I hope you are able to understand this. Now let us come to the other aspects. So let me just take up some sheets. So now let us come to the other aspect. What is that? I don't know if it is making sense. Please do give comments, likes, and do share. I hope if this was heard by all your team members together, your manager especially, tag this or forward it to your manager. Hopefully, if they are able to hear this, then there's a lot of things that could be worthwhile. They will get the best use of it. Okay. So now let us look at this. So you understood the strategic decision making with respect to the estimations. So now, how is all these things going to come up? What are all these estimation stuff? What are the nonsense that is happening in the industry with respect to estimations? Is it the same? The answer is people are using estimations as commitments. So it is not commitment. So why should we estimate? We have to only estimate to mitigate the risk. That is very clear from this session so far. Okay. So now let us get into the next part. What are the different levels where you can estimate? When can you estimate? So when to estimate? And I'm very specifically talking about the Scrum. Let's restrict ourselves to Scrum and talk about it. So when to estimate? First of all, we know that the Scrum framework has, let's say this is the time axis. This is one sprint. So this is a sprint, which is a cycle of inspect and adapt. We have sprint planning meeting, and the next sprint planning meeting comes up here, the next cycle. But then within this period, that is within this sprint, somewhere in between, depending on the strategy of the team, you are going to go ahead and do what is called as product backlog refinement, or product owner manages the product backlog. So what does that mean? You have a to-do list of items. You're going to bring them into a level that is ready. So we're going to just mark this way. Now, thank you so much for the comments. Please keep leaving your comments and posting it. I would also appreciate if you can post this video or reshare this on your LinkedIn profiles or on an email to all of your friends and colleagues. That would be great. Okay, let's remove all the myths and the misunderstanding about the estimations. And please do leave your comments so that the questions I can answer. If you have any specific question, I'll take up specifically the questions which is coming up. Okay. Now we have a product backlog refinement. Okay. So here the uncertain item has become small. And that is what is a product backlog refinement context, right? The product backlog refinement means you go from uncertainty to certainty, keep the product backlog item small, such that the team members can inspect and adapt within a sprint and reduce the risk. So now look at this. This small product backlog item is an input for the next sprint planning meeting based on the goal that the product owner is going to set or mutually agreed. Now think over. Here, during the product backlog refinement, you will estimate. But then please use your common sense and ask yourself whatever you are doing. Why would you want to estimate? The answer is very simple. You are going to estimate in product backlog refinement to answer one question, which is the size inspect adaptable within a sprint? Is the size inspect adaptable within a sprint? That means you have a sprint length which is fixed, and you know what is the team size, how much are the sprint, what do you call the context about the sprint. So you're going to go ahead and first look at, is the estimate that I have for a product backlog item within the sprint? Okay, that is why we want to do it. And if not, break it. Super. So why we estimate in product backlog refinement? To break it into smaller chunks. That's clear. Now I want to ask you, you're estimating to check if the size is inspect adaptable within a sprint and then break it into small. Can you think like this? Without estimation, if we can have small, what does small stand for? Small stands for the product backlog item can be inspect adapted within a sprint. So can you think of the product backlog item being inspect adapted within a sprint? If we can have a small product backlog item, then why estimate? Have you thought of this? Look at this. As I always keep telling, always look at the purpose. Why are we estimating? And then look at it. Okay. So in product backlog refinement, you can go ahead and estimate, but then you have to make sure that the result is small. It's a small result. Okay. What are the most popular estimation techniques in the what do you call this, product backlog refinement? So let's look at the tools and techniques that are used in product backlog refinements that are for estimation. So remember, the estimations here we are talking about is a size estimation. And I have already told you in my previous explanation that the size estimation is predominantly going to talk about the complexity of the work, and you can use story points or t-shirt sizes. So now the unit that the team is going to use, let's assume story point. Let's assume story point. We'll come to the story point again. So if the unit is story point, then the references will be like 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, let's say 20 modified version and so on. Now, what is that you can do in sprint product backlog refinement? There is a technique that people use which is called as planning poker. Now, unfortunately, many people use this planning poker without understanding hidden tail of it. Okay, others are doing it, we have to do it. And somebody gave a planning poker card, you have to use it. I mean, absolute nonsense. People don't have sense about what they are doing. So let's clarify. Planning poker is a technique of estimation. Technique to estimate. Okay. Now, planning poker, what does planning poker say? You have a team and the team has got some product backlog item to work on. So the whole team looks at this and they're going to come up with an estimate. And many people are using like, oh, developers say 3 story points, code developers say 2 story point, 3 story point, the test engineer says 5 story point, 8 story point. So what should we do? All these are nonsense crap. Story point, which is the size estimation, is not dependent on a team member. It is dependent, it is the complexity and the known and unknowns of the team. Okay, it is a product backlog item. So now look at this. If the team has to estimate this item, let's say I'll put a question mark on this. They want to estimate. They cannot estimate with one story point equal to 8 hours. Absolute nonsense. I'm going to write it down. Please show it to the people who are using it, and you can call out my name. I have no problem. This is absolute nonsense. And for people who are using this one story point equals 8 hours, I have no idea what they are doing and why they are doing it. You want to have the call? Let me just tell you. Think about it. We have in mathematics, if A equal to B, then wherever we have B, we will replace A. That means we will never use the term B after the statement. Replace B with A. Now my question is, if one story point is equal to 8 hours and that is what people are using or want to use, why do you want to use story point? Just replace everywhere you are saying story point with 8 hours and you have already created a nonsense. How? You are expecting that the effort required for that story to be 8 hours, 16 hours or multiples of 8. Absolute nonsense. I mean, this is itself completely a different topic. I may talk to for 1 hour. Okay, let's look at this. So now, what is the technique for planning poker? You have a story card which needs to be estimated. So the technique says the team member should have a reference. This is the reference, which means if I go to this team and say, hey guys, do you know what is 2-story for you? They should be able to come up and tell me this is 2-story point for me. They should be able to show me a story card which is 2-story point. Okay. And then if I say I need a 5-story point, they should be able to say that this is a 5-story point according to our reference. It is like you going to a shop and asking a person, hey, this is a t-shirt. What is the size of this t-shirt? He's going to go ahead and tell you the size of this t-shirt compared to another reference which he has in the shop. Exactly that way. Look at these people are people in the shop. Somebody is asking what is the size. They will have to refer to something in the shop. And this reference is not a number of hours. This reference is a complexity reference. And one of the biggest problem is you don't know how complex is complex. Do you know? No. I mean, how can you say how complex is complex? It's absolutely not possible. So what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to inspect and adapt. So now I'm going to give an example here. Think about it. In planning poker, if there are 6 people in the team, you have a story and each of these 5 people are going to say the story is 5-story point, 5-story points, 5-story points, 8-story point, 13-story points and 5-story point. So they are going to estimate this in story points and they are going to give so many story points by each of the person. Now what are you going to do with this? Simple. You're going to go ahead and now say we are going to ask the people with 5-story point and 13-story point to have a conversation and then talk about why it is 5, why they think it is 5, and the people who are 13, they'll talk about why it is 13. Maybe person who is 8 can also talk about why it is 8. And after one round of discussion, we'll go ahead and re-estimate. Okay. Now the re-estimation comes up like this. Now what? Naveen, we will again go ahead and ask the 5% and then the 13% to talk to each other or explain why it is 13, why it is 3, and then we will go ahead and do a re-estimation. Okay, now what? This is 8, 8, 8, 8, 13 and 8. Okay, now what? Most of the people are going to say, okay, now that most of the people are going to agree with 8, we are just going to mark, we're going to mark 8 as estimation, and we will mutually agree that it is a majority, so we'll keep it as 8. Right? This is what you have been doing. This is absolute nonsense. Nobody told you, unfortunately. Why? Because this 8 has no meaning to the team. Instead, when you're doing this, what you're supposed to do is the first step that you have to understand. When you are, see, estimation has got nothing to do with Scrum. Estimation is an estimation technique. So when you are applying this to Scrum, you should understand what Scrum is expecting and what is the technique going to say. I always keep saying tools in the wrong people's hand is an absolute nonsense. Estimation does not have a brain. Your brain is a tool's brain. I mean, please go ahead and watch the video that I have. Why Agile fails in the organizations. Beautiful 1 hour of a session. I mean, you will understand a lot of things that people are going to do wrong. Why Agile does not succeed in an organization. Forward it to your managers. Yeah, let them understand what is the mistakes that they're trying to do. Copy paste nonsense. Look at this. Then what are you supposed to do? Planning poker is a good exercise. But how do you use this technique? First of all, you should go ahead and say this. Let's say in the planning poker, I'm going to use this space. In the planning poker, you have a reference. So your reference is going to be like this. A reference, 1 story card, 2 story card, 3 points, 5, 13, say 13, 20, 40, whatever number. Okay, Fibonacci series. I'll come back and say why Fibonacci series later on. Okay, so now let's put it up as 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, let's say 20. You know what is the first step that the team members have to do? The first step that the team members have to do is in this list, identify. Now I'm talking about product backlog refinement. In this list, they have to identify what is our definition of small. Let's assume the team says anything between 1, 2, and a 3. We are going to mark it as small. And all of these are big for us. Now you see a beautiful thing coming up. Resonates with what I was mentioning here. There are 2 elements, hydrogen and I don't care. Simple. The product backlog item is either small or I don't care. Why? Because they are not small. Now apply this to our Fibonacci series. You know, if most of my teams don't estimate in Fibonacci series, in the story points, but when they do, this is how we do. If the estimation is coming up like this, 5, 5, 5, 8, 13, 5, most of you would say, we are going to go ahead and ask 5%, 13%, 8% to talk and then have a discussion, negotiation, all these things. You know, in my teams, we don't care about this. What is the thought process we have? Simple. 5, big. 5, big. 5, big. 8, big. 13, big. 5, big. Everybody by default, what they are saying, everybody by default, they are saying it is big. Forget about the debate. The immediate next step is when it is big, break it down into small. Which means the requirement that we are having a discussion now, you should not continue the discussion unless you break it down into some more meaningful small. It does not matter. I mean, everybody come up with 8888. What does this mean? Everybody is agreeing that it is big, 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 big. Now you tell me, is this big, big, big small for you to get into the sprint? No. That means your exercise of a planning poker in the discussion points where you arrive at 8888 is an absolute nonsense. You don't have a reference of small. You don't have a reference of small. You're not keeping the product backlog item small. You're just estimating the number. Why? Somebody said you have to estimate small. You have to estimate in story point. You estimated in story point. I mean, please do comment if you are doing this nonsense or you have heard of these things. That will help me understand that yes, what I'm talking is really happening. Yep. So in the teams that we have to coach, The planning poker is an estimation technique, a beautiful estimation technique. But then what are we going to do with this? We are going to identify what is small, what is big, and if the story points are in the big size, we don't care. We have to break it down into smaller chunks. Now you think over, once it is broken down into smaller chunks and everybody agrees that it is small, small, small. Example, this team, everybody says 555, and now we have broken down this into, let's say, two parts. And for each of these two parts, the team members are going to estimate it as 2, 2, 3, 3, 2, 2. You know, it does not matter whether you give a 2-point or a 3-point. It is basically small. This means it is small. So just give one of the number and then go on. Example, your strategy could be the maximum number that repeats. You give a number 2 and then go ahead. There is no problem. Now let us say the second one happens to be something like this. 3, 3, 2, 5, 3, 2. Now you have a chance. You ask this person why this person still thinks it is big. Is there a scope for making it small? Divide this into smaller parts. That is what you have to do. So remember, in product backlog refinement, you have only small items to get into the sprint planning meeting. So your objective of a product backlog refinement is to keep this kind of a small. Your goal is not to estimate. Your goal is to estimate with the intent of keeping it small. So I hope now you have made it as small. So now let us get into the next part. What is the next part? The next part that people have used is, the next part that the people have come up with is the sprint planning meeting. So let's go to the sprint planning meeting. What is the sprint planning meeting? Here, this is a time estimation. This is a time. You have the start and the end. This is sprint planning meeting. And this is your sprint. Now, in sprint planning meeting, what are you going to do? You're going to first talk to the product owner, set the goal, and based on the goal, you're going to pull out the product backlog items. So what is going to happen in the sprint planning meeting? You have a product backlog items. This is your to-do list of items, that is product backlog. And the product backlog by default, by default, certain items will be complex, certain items are small. So you have small product backlog items. Now, what are the things that the the teams are going to do? The product owner is going to set the goal, identify a functionality which you want to inspect and adapt, a beautiful inspect adaptable functionality by end of the sprint. And then the team members look into the small items that are ready. This is ready product backlog items. And they are going to pull during the sprint planning meeting. Now, all these items that gets pulled into the sprint planning meeting are by default small. If they are big, they are not eligible to get into the sprint planning meeting. So that you are clear. Now let us go to the next step. What do you do in the sprint planning meeting? In sprint planning meeting, we are basically supposed to plan. Now this planning is like you are going from your house to airport. So you are supposed to go ahead and plan for reaching the airport. Now, what are the things that you're going to plan? In this plan, basically the sprint planning meeting, you have another estimation, sprint planning. During sprint planning, you do estimation. Now again, you need to ask the objective. First one, why are we estimating? And if the answer for this estimation is to know how much team can finish or commit. Good. I'll be very happy. Throw your all your knowledge into the dustbin because that's an absolute nonsense. You cannot estimate how much the team can finish or commit to within a sprint. This is not possible. If you don't trust me, go ahead, open the Scrum guide and then see the word. No matter how much the team is planning, you cannot commit on what can be done. They can only be committed toward the goal, meaning they can do 100% of what they can do towards reaching the goal. Now, you know that how much the teams can finish or commit, and this is what is the goal. Then this is nonsense. You cannot. Basically, this is you cannot know how much it can be finished. Why? Even though we have broken down into smaller chunks, there are high chances that there are uncertainties during the sprint which can have impact. So your estimation is not for knowing how much the teams can commit or how much the team can finish. Your estimation is not to know and commit. If you are saying that we are estimating with the goal of risk planning, and the second thing is we want to forecast so that, remember, the forecast is within the risk, then inspect adapt becomes easier. So inspect and adapt becomes easier. So our goal to estimate is to forecast and inspect and adapt. Now, if that is the case, if you want to forecast, the estimations techniques for forecasting is, one is called capacity based planning. The second one is called historical data. In capacity based planning, you use the available capacity and required capacity. So available capacity should be always greater than or equal to the required capacity. And historical data is statistical data, average. It is just like a run rate. So now you think over, how are we focusing? In the capacity based planning, we want to know if our available capacity is greater than required capacity, then we are good to go. So you estimate to see, is our planning and forecasting within our available capacity? As long as it is within our available capacity, you're good to go. And if it is a historical database, as long as our average, which we have done in the past, is known, like the average score the team has done is 9.5 runs per over, 9 runs per over, 6.5 runs per over, 3.5 runs per over. That will give you an average and you can plan better. Okay. So now we have in sprint planning meeting, if at all you want to estimate, in sprint planning meeting, your estimation, if it is capacity based planning, then it is going to be effort estimation. If you're using historical database, then this is going to be size based. Now here is an interesting one. Look at this. If you want to estimate in the effort, the developer who is in the team, a code developer, so let me write it as a code developer in the team, their effort is different from test engineer's effort. Now this is where the efforts of each of these test engineers' effort will all be different. And together you are going to look at the total available capacity, total required capacity to do that small. But since the product backlog item itself is small, there is a high probability that, I mean, there has to be a high probability that both these code developers, test engineers, and all the other people involved all together will be able to finish this product backlog item within the sprint. Now the question is whether they are able to finish 1 or 5, that's a different story. But each one independently they are able to finish. So you go ahead and look at it. And that is why Scrum says if you have to break it down into small, break it down in such a way that it can be done in a day or a two. So this is the effort estimation. Now let us, so who is going to give the effort? The senior person will give a more effort, the junior, I mean lesser effort, the junior person might give a higher effort. So if there is a task, this is a very important one. If there is a task, let's say task 1, and if this is given to a person 1, they may estimate 8 hours. If the same thing is given to a second person, they may estimate 4 hours. If the same thing is given to a different skill set, let's say for example a test engineer, they may say 18 hours. Now which one is correct? The answer is depends on who's going to do it. It is like asking, I have a task to go from my house to airport. How much is the effort? How much time will I take? When you go by airlift, it will take half an hour or 10 minutes. If you go by car, it will take 1 hour. If you go by bicycle, it may take 4 hours. You walk, it will take 8 hours. I don't know. But then can you expect just because your airlift is taking 30 minutes, you want to car to go in 30 minutes? No, that is what nonsense the people are doing. I mean, a senior person estimates 8 hours and a junior person estimates 18 hours. Please don't take an average and divide by 2 and then say that, okay, this is, I mean, take an average and then say, oh, this is the 9 hours of work. That is nonsense. It all depends on who's going to drive, who's going to work on it. So in capacity-based planning, there is no negotiation between senior person, junior person, how much time it will take. If you think that the work has to be done in 4 hours, give it to the person who says 4 hours. Over, simple. Let that person work on it. When I say you, as a team. So let's come to the historical database. Look at historical database, that is so simple. Why? Historical database is a history of what the team has done in the past. This is past data. Now I'm going to give you a very, very interesting one. Many people use velocity, velocity. All these are nonsense. Even the originator or a creator of velocity and story points, Ron Jeffries, clearly mentions that stop using this. This is a nonsense nowadays. People are using that. Forget about me. Please open Ron Jeffries and then look at his posts. He clearly objects people saying that, okay, I might have created all these things, but then this is absolute nonsense. People don't know what they're trying to do. Stop using it. So if at all you're going to use, look at this. Use your common sense. Don't look at copy paste. First of all, it is a size based. Now, the moment I say size based, your common sense should now say that only small product backlog items should be pulled into the sprint planning meeting. No big items will be there. So when the sprint planning meeting is only small items that are pulled into the sprint planning meeting, let's assume that you have spent 10 sprints. In all the 10 sprints, you are going to count how many small product backlog items were done in the past. So if it is like a runs now. If you have in the past, if you have done five product backlog items, 100% completed in the last 10 sprints, the next sprint on a historical data, there's a high probability that you might do somewhere around the same range, but it is not a commitment. You can do somewhere around the same range. It is not a commitment. So now think over, your average says, the past data says 4 to 6 product backlog items have been potentially completed. 4 to 6, that's a range. So as long as, now apply this to your planning, as long as the team members plan anywhere between 4 to 6 is good. But this 4 to 6 is not a commitment. 4 to 6 is a plan, forecast. Now that is risk planning. How is this risk planning? If you plan less than 4, you know that you're under planning. Probably you will have free time during the sprint, or potentially there might be some free times coming up, so you might want to plan for it. Or if you plan for more than six, it is not that you will not finish more than six, but then it, it is not necessary to plan for more than six, because historically you have not had that choices of finishing more than six. So if at all you have time, you can do it later on. So why worry? So now you have clearly understood what are the two things. Estimations that you popularly hear in Scrum or in the teams working with Scrum, the estimations, there is a product backlog refinement and estimations during sprint planning meeting. And this is an absolute nonsense that some of the teams do. What is that? If you're in product backlog refinement, the estimation is purely about the size estimation, and it has to be small. I don't know how many times I've repeated the word small so far. And if you are doing a estimation in sprint planning meeting and you choose to use capacity based planning, then you're going to go ahead and use effort estimation, and use the effort estimation. Whatever is the effort that the team member says, that is the effort. If you want somebody to get it done faster, let that person who can do it faster do it. Example, I wanted to go to airport. I asked my father, Dad, can you drop me? And he says, yes, I can drop you, but I will take 1 hour to drive. But if I drive, I can drive in 45 minutes. Now, if my risk is at 1 hour, I will never let my father drive. I will say, I'm going to go ahead and drive myself, because I'm going to have 45 minutes and there it is within my risk. So I'm going to drive it. Now, that is the same thing. How much risk the team members wants to do. There is a task that needs to be completed. The senior person takes it, he or she will take 4 hours. The junior person is going to take 18 hours. Don't debate about it. Look at the importance of the task and see who contributing to the task can get the best returns at that point of time. Let the team decide and they work on it. You're least worried about it. And by the way, the effort estimation should not be a concern for the company, for the team member, outside the team member. Effort estimation is for the team to inspect and adapt during the sprint. Then what is that for the company, for the managers, for the management? The answer is it does not matter. You know why? Because you have already fixed the scope. You're just waiting for the scope to be released. You're least worried about what happens within a sprint. You should not be worried about it. And I'm going to give you an example. Let's assume you want to know what are you going to be worried about within a sprint. I want to ask you a simple question. Let's go ahead and I'm going to ask this simple question. Okay, think about it. If I say you go to the uh, restaurant and you order a food, let's say you ordered vegetable biryani. On the table, how many of you are thinking about what is happening inside the kitchen? How much percentage of work is completed now? Zero. You're just waiting there and making a choice. I mean, enjoying the situation, saying that uh, my my food is getting prepared. I just have to wait for some time, and it will come back when it is done. You don't go to the kitchen and then ask the chef how much is my vegetable biryani prepared. How many of you have done that? No. Now think over. The chef is like a developers in the team. The customer on the table is your stakeholders and the management or a user. You have given an order. I need this requirement. The team is working on it. Now you should not be worried about what is the work done. I mean, what is the intermittent steps that the team is doing. They are the one who's accountable for getting the maximum quality into the product and the developing the product. They will work with the product owner. They will look at all those things. But management should not look at, okay, tell me what is the burn down chart looking like. Nonsense. I mean, you don't plan for a burn down chart. You plan for the goal, you work on the goal. You don't look at the burn down chart. There is a beautiful video that I've prepared almost for 1.5 hours for a burn down chart. I mean, go ahead and watch that video. You'll get shocking information about burn down charts. Forward it to your management. Forward it to the people whom you know, the team members. I'm sure it is going to be a shocking information for you. Now let us look at this. The example. The management has given the product backlog item for the team to work on, or the product backlog item is in the sprint. They have pulled into the sprint. For the rest of the world, it is like a black box. Team is working on it. It is work in progress. Don't worry about what is the intermittent steps. And let's assume you have to just wait till the sprint review. That is when you will know how much is done, what is not done. And you take a feedback on what best can be done for the product. Now think over. If you are interested in what is happening within a sprint and what the team members are doing, my question is, why are you interested? Example, you will enter the restaurant kitchen and then you are interested in what the chef is doing. Why are you interested? Do you want the food to be prepared faster? Do you want to make some changes as per your requirement? I mean, you want to go ahead and ask them and then support? Probably you want to support something so that it can be done faster. My answer is, you don't need a status update for that. You don't need any update for that. Just go to the team and say, hey guys, I'm here to help you. You're a manager, go tell the team members, I'm here to help you during the sprint. Ask me any help. I mean, that will be a much better opportunity for the teams to ask for help and get the help. The management to get the work done faster rather than depending on burn down chart, depending on the task board. I mean, management should not look at the task board. Honestly, it is the team who should be serious about it. The day your team starts looking at it seriously, taking an inspection up steps, the management will stop doing it. Think over. I don't know, there are a lot of people who have been watching this program and I have been telling you a lot about the estimations. I hope these points are very useful for you. The different estimation techniques, I've already told you there are one of the estimation technique is planning poker, which is completely misused. From now onwards, if you want to go ahead and use it as small and big, and then anything which is small, you can go ahead and mark it as small and then continue. There is no problem. And the moment you remove this context of one story point equals 8 hours, all your nonsense will be nullified. You will not have any next step to do. And how do you find out this 1 story point, 2 story point, 3 story points? It is basically the small size and relative size. So that's a big story, a big technique again. As of now, I'm gonna hope that the information that has been shared so far has been useful. So for people who have not been able to join this, let me just quickly share the summary of what we have done so far so that it is useful. Okay. So we started off with this. We spoke about the estimations. Why are we estimating? It is risk mitigation and risk planning. And then we understood about product backlog refinement, why it is important, what is the context around it, the complex zone. In the complex zone, there is an evolving structure, and that is where we need to inspect that. And we have to have something as a variable. Then we looked at the estimations with respect to the product backlog items. wherein we said that the product backlog items constantly gets refined. And as we start refining the product backlog items, the estimations can be of size based or effort based. Size based estimations are story point and t-shirt size. Effort based, you know that it is hours based. Okay. And then we spoke about uncertain product backlog items cannot be estimated, and even if you want to estimate, you can only estimate the size, and that is with the objective of what are we going to do after we estimate. And this is exactly what we explain later on, that product backlog items which are estimated as big, this cannot enter the sprint, so there is no point in estimating some big number. You have to estimate it as a small and break it down into small. Effort estimation, you cannot estimate effort for a product backlog item which is big enough, and this has no meaning because there's a lot of uncertainty. And the product backlog item, the uncertain product backlog item having an effort estimation is a huge variation. Variation could be 100%, 200%. We don't know. Okay. Then comes up where we talked about uh, all those things that people have to take care of. So while estimating, we usually take care of it as a small or this is my personal choice. Small or I don't care. It is not small. What is the number? I don't care. Why? Because it cannot be picked in the sprint. So we don't care about all these nonsense. The next one, we have a scope, time, cost, and quality. So in 1990s to 2010 or even to now, people are just using the strategy which is fixed scope, fixed time, fixed cost, fixed quality. This absolutely does not work in the latest trend because we are in a dynamic and competitive world. So in the dynamic and competitive world, we need to go ahead and ensure that we have an inspect and adapt cycles embedded into our work. So in the traditional methods, we could have used all this fix. That is because we know that it is in a simple zone, and even if something goes wrong, we could add a buffer. But there is a different story, that buffer was not sufficient because we don't know how much buffer is going to add for uncertainty, and hence you had a cost overrun, schedule overrun, low quality, and all those nonsense as an outcome. But now what are we supposed to do? You should have at least one variable so that you can manage this uncertainty. And that variable, if it is within the risk appetite, then we are good to go. Okay. So you estimate, and estimate, you should not commit. So estimation is not for a commitment. Estimation, committing the number that you estimate is wrong. Estimation is estimation for you to be risk mitigating and risk planning. And then the next one, I gave an example where if you have scope fixed, cost fixed, quality fixed, time is a variable, how you can go ahead and look at the time variable and also have a scope variability. Why are we having scope variability? Scope variability is because of the complex zone that we cannot change. And within the scope that we have identified for a release, scope can change. There are a lot of changes. The changes will be into the system. But because there are complexity, even though I said the scope is fixed, when I say scope is fixed, it is not that functionality is fixed. The number of functionality that gets released, that is fixed. Like 75 features have to be done. There could be 10 changes or 100 changes within that 75 features, but all 75 features have to be 100% completed. There could be changes that goes on within a sprint. And because of these changes in adaptability, we are going to make the time as a variable. So time gets predicted. So time is constantly getting predicted, and we have a risk appetite, which is a final timeline where, like, within the risk, if our prediction is always within the risk, there is no problem. The day we start predicting beyond our risk appetite, we need to change our strategy. And this is where you cannot use the same strategy. You have to go ahead and change it. So this is where our estimations make a big plan. And I gave a beautiful example. If reaching the airport terminal is expected to be 15 minutes, and let's say 5 minutes, in 5 minutes you have to reach the airport terminal, and you're in a car, and the expected car journey in the traffic jam is about 15 minutes. Nobody is going to stay in the car. Your BP is going to shoot up, and you will probably walk or run to the destination. So that is what strategy changes. Now, the release strategy is best understood, especially these estimations, and then all these things are best understood with the cricket's current run rate and required run rate. So current run rate is what the team is currently predicting and currently performing. I mean, currently having. Required run rate is a prediction where the current run rate is better than the required run rate. You don't have to worry. You're going to potentially win the match. That's what is the focus. Then we spoke about A team member should not look at estimations as commitments. So you should, when should you estimate? The estimations during the sprint is going to be the product backlog refinement estimations. And in the product backlog refinement estimations, why are we estimating? We are estimating so that the size can be within the sprint, that is small size, and if not, break it down into small size. That is the purpose. So think about it. If without estimation, if we can have a small product backlog item, then why estimate at all? Even without estimation, we can go ahead with it. And that is what my teams do. We don't estimate, we just break it down into smaller chunks and we are done. So in estimations, now you can go ahead and use this technique of size estimation. So size estimation, one of the units of size estimation is story point. You have a reference scale. In planning poker, how do you estimate? You take up the team, take the product backlog item, based on the reference scales, you start comparing and estimating. Let's assume that the team members give a 5, 5, 5, 8, 13, 5. Many people are going to go ahead and negotiate discussion and then arrive at something that is common and then say 8 story point is our common estimate by all of the people. And that is absolute nonsense, because what we are supposed to do is, while, while using this planning poker, just give me a moment. While using this planning poker, we have to go ahead and make sure that the all the product backlog items are small. So you divide the story points that you have into small and then big. Anything that is big needs to be broken down into smaller chunks. You don't have to worry about whether it is 1 point or 2 point. Basically it is small, that's all matters. So remember the technique of it is either small or I don't care. Then lastly, we spoke about the second place where people estimate, that is in sprint planning meeting. So the first one where you will hear a lot of estimation is product backlog refinement. The second one where you will hear estimation is in sprint planning meeting. In product backlog refinement, you estimate the size to keep it small. In sprint planning meeting, if you choose to use capacity based planning, then you're going to use effort based estimation. If you're not using effort based estimation, that is capacity based planning, there is no need for you to write the task and estimate the task. You can just leave it. You don't need them. Okay. And the worst thing that people can do is using estimations to commit within the sprint and make sure that everything is committed. That's absolutely nonsense. Let me give once again why it is nonsense. Why it is nonsense to commit within a sprint. Because if you take within a sprint, this is what is the context. Why is it is nonsense? Because within a sprint, scope is fixed, time is fixed, cost, team members is fixed, and then the quality, you expect a high quality to be there. And all these things fixed within a sprint is an absolute nonsense. It is like the same problem that I told you previously. Obviously, with this kind of 1990 strategies that you are using within a sprint, you will come up with something not done by the end of the sprint, low quality, low quality or some nonsense. So you have to be a little careful. So you cannot fix all 4 within a sprint. It has to be at least one has to be a variable within a sprint. Okay. Now I hope this has been useful. So if there are any questions, I'm going to take up the questions. Otherwise, we are going to wind up the session now. I hope it was useful, and if you think that this was good, please do let me know. You can write a message to me or WhatsApp on this. And I don't know if this content is going to be available on the YouTube channel after this session. So people who are watching it, we'll keep it for some more time and then you can watch it. Then it is going to be offline because this is the core content that we coach. So this is, I've given you a lot of content which is free now. Okay, please go ahead and support us. Okay, so I'm going to wait for a minute. If there are any questions, please post it on the chat message or on LinkedIn so that I can answer those questions and quickly uh, wind up the session. Okay, Soumya is asking why we use Fibonacci series in estimation. Soumya, we are going to use Fibonacci series in estimation because uh, the uncertainty is higher as we go and look at a bigger and bigger problems or a bigger and bigger things. So the bigger the size, the bigger the uncertainty, and hence we use a Fibonacci series where the the number gets bigger and bigger as you move on. That's all. Okay, thank you so much. I don't see any questions coming up, so I'm going to wind up the session now. Please do go ahead, leave your comments. How was it? How was the session on the LinkedIn channel or on the chats that you have messaged? I look forward for many more such thought-provoking sessions. Thank you so much and good night. You have been there for a lot of time. I hope it was worthwhile. This is Naveen Nanjundappa signing off from 12 Principles Consulting. We do a lot of programs related to Certified Scrum Master, Certified Product Owner, and the Advanced Scrum Master. Almost every week I do a class. So please go ahead, recommend this class to anybody whom you know or anybody who is looking for it. And we are here to serve people with the best knowledge that we can. Thank you so much, and you have a good time. And I'm going to sign off now.